Good afternoon. We're here at Free Speech TV, and I'm so pleased. Donna Smith, I'm with Progressive Democrats of America, and I'm welcoming Tulsi Gabbard, who is a representative from Hawaii's 2nd District. We're so thrilled to have Tulsi in Colorado.
Thank you.
It's a real honor to have you here with us. You're one of the people that we most admire in terms of your work in Congress right now. We know that environment is tough, and we know you bring great grace and honor to what you do in Congress, and we're very pleased about that. For those who don't know you, you are currently still active duty military, are you not?
I serve in the Hawaii Army National Guard.
And what do you do there, Tulsi?
I am a major, and I work within the personnel section of the National Guard. I've been in now for about 15 years, served on 2 Middle East deployments in previous years, and a number of services and deployments in Hawaii, responding to natural disasters and other issues that our folks at home have faced. Wow.
How do you make that work with your congressional service? How does it mesh with the times when you have to serve in the Guard?
Yeah, I mean, the travel back and forth, I think, is probably the biggest challenge, obviously time, but I think this is one of the things about the National Guard and Reserves is you've got people of all different professions, doctors, teachers, students, people who work in construction, for the post office. I mean, people in almost every single industry you can imagine who make that time, 2 days a month and 2 weeks a year at least, to go in and put on the uniform and go and train and be prepared to serve our constituents at home. My role is not so different from everyone else.
Wow. So folks call you Congresswoman Gabbard or Major Gabbard while you're there?
In uniform, I'm Major Gabbard. But a lot of the folks who I serve with are people who I deployed with. And so we're all, very tight-knit, almost like a family. So to most people, I'm just Tulsi.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you anticipate doing that for a while to continue in the Guard?
We'll see, as long as they let me, as long as I'm able to continue serving in a meaningful way.
And this is totally personal. What brought you to that? What made you think you wanted to serve in the National Guard?
I wanted to, this was after 9/11, and I wanted to find a way that I could serve both the people of Hawaii in my home state and the people of our country, and this was, the National Guard offered a way to do that. To do both. And so what some people don't know is that those in the National Guard, their first quote-unquote commander-in-chief is the governor of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So if the president wants to mobilize a state National Guard, he's got to go through the governor of that state. So it meant a lot to me to be able to be in a position where I could help respond to emergencies and to help serve the people of our state, and also, if called, to serve the people of our country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
I appreciate it. I've made some of my best friends in my life through my service in the military, and have been exposed to different experiences that I wouldn't have otherwise. And a lot of those experiences are what drove me to serve in Congress, to be a part of the policy decisions that are being made that affect decisions on war and peace, that affect our military, that affect our veterans, and how our limited resources in this country are used.
Well, we're going to talk more about the OFF Act in just a minute, but I know you and I share a common interest in peace, and oftentimes people believe that folks who serve in the military are interested in war more than they're interested in peace, and that's not true.
It's not the case.
Tell me what you think about a lot about ending regime change, war, and so forth. Tell me why, and what's your perspective on that, and what do you think about some of those hot spots in the world right now?
I have had the good fortune of spending time with veterans from World War II, from the Korean War, from the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, and a lot of my friends who served in the post 9/11 era. And there's a special bond that exists there between veterans, and I can't keep track of how many times I've heard from veterans across generations who have seen firsthand the cost of war, they are some of our greatest champions for peace because they understand. They have seen it, they have lived it, they've experienced this high cost of war themselves, both on American lives, on our troops, whether it's those who pay the ultimate price and don't make that trip home, or those who do make the trip home and carry these both visible and invisible wounds with them. But also the cost of war on the people of these countries where the United States has gone and waged these regime change wars. What to speak of the cost on our nation's treasure. When we look, for example, at the trillions of dollars that have been spent on these regime change wars since 9/11 alone, and then we look in our communities and we look at failing infrastructure, contaminated water, poorly resourced education, the lack of universal health care. You can go down the list of the very basic needs that we have in our community and how those resources could have been spent to invest in rebuilding and building stronger communities right here at home.
Where do you think the worst scenarios exist right now? I mean, obviously, we know you're very interested in Syria and what has happened there, but also Yemen certainly is
Absolutely.
the crisis for the civilian populations. And not I worry about everybody, but that, oh my gosh, the refugees being created in these places, seeing the scenes is heartbreaking.
It is.
What are you thinking the prospects are of really starting to bring an end to some of this?
I wish I could say that the prospects are good, but I am worried and I'm heartbroken that they're not. And the problem is because there are too few people, leaders in Washington, who are willing to know the truth and or speak the truth about what is happening in these places and why. And Yemen is a great example. We heard just the other day about how Saudi bombs went in and dropped bombs on a wedding in Yemen. Not just one round of bombs, but coming back in an hour later and dropping another set of bombs. For anyone to say that that was a so-called accident is ridiculous. Tons of civilians were killed in that attack. So what is our role in that? We have our United States military refueling Saudi planes. They are dropping American bombs. And we have American troops sitting in their operations center, helping them and providing them with intel and targeting guidance. This is a war that the United States is involved with, has picked a side on, that is causing this huge humanitarian disaster on Yemeni civilians that the Congress has not authorized, that the American people have not approved, and that is counter to American interests, national security interests, and otherwise. And yet this continues as it has for years, and there is no end in sight. Rather than calling out Saudi Arabia for their actions in perpetrating terrorism around the world, in spreading this Wahhabi Salafist ideology that is common to groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Boko Haram. You look at these different terrorist groups who are slaughtering innocent people in different parts of the world. This ideology is what is driving all of them. And Saudi Arabia spends hundreds of billions of dollars to fund schools and teachers teaching this specific ideology around the world. And yet some people in the United States, leaders in the United States, call Saudi Arabia our greatest partner in counterterrorism. Just the irony and the hypocrisy is glaring, and yet too few people in Washington are willing to stand out and speak the truth, and therefore we can't have a vote. We can't have a vote on these issues. Bernie Sanders led a bipartisan resolution to the Senate to try to end these atrocities in Yemen, and that vote was blocked. A similar vote was attempted in the House, and that vote was, the resolution was essentially rewritten into something that originally denounced Saudi Arabia's actions, and the final draft ended up praising Saudi Arabia. So it's these kinds of things that if people understand the truth, as with most things, you can follow the money trail. And you can
Yes.
see how Saudi Arabia, for example, along with other countries like Qatar and others, but they fund think tanks in Washington. They fund different media groups. They fund lobbyists. And so you think about who's influencing American policy. If you look and you pull apart the curtain, the answer is there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to count on you to be one of those voices of truth continuing to speak, because the American people can't know unless we have voices of truth
And that's
speaking
what's
on
interesting, Donna, and PDA has been a tremendous partner in spreading the word on these important issues. Is that when I talk with people and I hear from people, and they get these issues, they're very easy to understand, and they get very quickly, this is not in the interest of our country. Why are we doing this? This is not in the interest of the people in these countries. Why are we doing this? And yet Washington exists in this bubble that is so detached from where the American people are, and where the consequences of continuing this destructive interventionist foreign policy, where that will continue to lead us.
Agreed. Wow, it's so important, and you're telling the truth in lots of areas, and one of the areas that I know that PDA folks are so thrilled that you're working is on the OFF Act.
Yes.
The OFF Act for a healthy, getting off fossil fuels. Thank goodness.
Yes.
100% renewables by 2035. Why do you think we're gaining so many co-sponsors right now, including, we're so excited, one of our own, Jared Polis of
Yes.
Colorado, one of your colleagues, just signed on as a co-sponsor.
Yes.
What do you think the energy behind that is right now?
The energy is coming from people and organizations like yours all across the country who are calling their congressmen and saying, hey, why aren't you a co-sponsor of this legislation yet?
Yeah.
It's the way the process works is not very complex, where if people are feeling strongly about an issue, you got to call, email, tweet, and Facebook message, whatever, your representative and ask them what their position is on these issues, whether it's the environment, peace and war, a number of other things that we're so concerned about. As you know, we have over 400 organizations across the country who have endorsed the Off Fossil Fuels Act. More and more people now, I think we're up to 35 co-sponsors on the legislation that when we introduced it, a lot of people said it was too aggressive and it went too far, too fast. But I think what more people are realizing is that the time is long overdue for real impactful change. And we have to move with a purpose, as we say in the military. You can't just dawdle along given what's at stake with our environment.
Well, you've been at environmental stuff a while, correct?
Yeah, I have.
That's really what brought you to public service in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I read some stories about you as a young woman. Not that you're not young now, because you are, but wasn't that something you did very early?
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Growing up in Hawaii, it's a beautiful place. Mountains, ocean, water, just everything. And so growing up there, and even culturally in Hawaii, you kind of grow up in a culture that values and respects Mother Earth, understands that really we draw our sustenance in life. Water is life. Land provides us with food. The ocean provides us with a playground. And so
for those of you who surf.
For those of us who surf, yes. So as a teenager, I started a nonprofit in Hawaii called the Healthy Hawaii Coalition, and really the focus was on water, because I just, from personal experience, I'd be paddling out to go surfing, and people are throwing trash, and there's trash floating in the water. There were efforts in Hawaii to build landfills over some of our biggest water aquifers, risking damaging and polluting the very source of our drinking water, which is beautiful and clean. So I wanted to try to do something a little different to see how do we start to change this. And I created a 2-day educational program for elementary school-aged kids. That day one was a skit called The Adventures of Water Woman and Oily Al.
And who was Water Woman?
I was the original Water Woman. I had my blue surf shorts and a blue cape and everything. And we took this program, had a coloring book, an activity book for the kids, but basically Water Woman would go and save the day every time Oily Al was about to do something that would damage the environment, and teach basic, simple lessons to the kids about how our everyday actions can either positively or negatively impact our home. And it was amazing to me, I think I was 16 or 17 at the time, to see in these kids who were in second, third, and fourth grade, kind of see the light bulb go off in their eyes as they saw things that they could relate to in their own lives, things they might have seen around in their house, or if they threw their soda can out the window of the car, or things like that. And to see that kind of difference was inspiring to me, to know that I wanted to continue down that path, to be in a place where I could make a difference for our home.
Wow, and you've certainly made the most of that.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
And I saw recently you sent out a message about Scott Pruitt and about, I can't think about the OFF Act and making progress on that without thinking about Scott Pruitt.
Yeah.
And what do you think about that situation? What chance do we have of protecting our climate and environment when we've got that going on at the EPA?
To have someone leading the EPA who very directly undermines the mission of the Environmental Protection Agency is a travesty. And so it requires, for the time that he is there, or whoever may end up replacing him, at the federal level, we've got to remain vigilant and continuing to push back wherever we can on the attempts to repeal and pull back on a lot of the progress that's been made. But what I know a lot of folks in Hawaii are doing, here in Colorado and California and states across the country, counties and states are taking action, so that even if the federal regulations end up being drawn back that protect our environment, then the counties and the states are taking action to say, hey, look, we've got to do what we can to continue to protect what we know is precious in our homes. And I think, with this, there's more opportunity, I think, than some people realize. And we've had conference calls with a lot of your members before. And I have an intern in my office who I just talked with yesterday. She's very passionate about climate change. The reason why she wanted to intern in my office was because of the Off Fossil Fuels Act.
Good.
And she said, how do we get Republicans to sign on to this? And, I think the important thing here is what you hear me talking about often, which is aloha. Reaching out to people with respect and with care, even if they may come from a different place ideologically, or they hold different political views. Because what I have found is once you start to have a conversation that is based on the common ground that we share, each of us comes from a home that we probably love, and families that we care about, and a desire to have a good future, whether it's for our kids or for our families or the next generation to come. And when we start our conversations there, rather than from an antagonistic, I'm better than you because I care about this or that, and both sides are guilty of this. If we start from a place of finding common ground and basic humanity, then that's where we can begin to find ways to make progress.
I wonder if that's why we saw recently, and we've seen it before, that the Washington Post and the Atlantic and other publications talk about you specifically being one of those few Democrats that Republicans like in many cases. Is that why you think it is? Because you treat people with respect regardless of ideology? What do you think that is about you that makes Republicans who might be less likely to trust a Democrat like you?
I do my best to live aloha, to live this life of aloha. That whether it's someone of a different religion, different politics, different race or ethnicity, or all the things that make us unique in this country, to treat them with respect and to come in and begin that conversation, that relationship there. And by doing that, or through doing that, during my time in Congress, I have found opportunities to work with Republicans on a number of issues where we might disagree and vote differently most of the time. I'll give you one example. A congressman from Virginia, who's a very conservative Republican, an Army veteran, former prosecutor in his state. He and I have partnered up to end the federal prohibition on marijuana. something that many people might be surprised by, an unlikely partnership. But he recognized the same things that I have about how dangerous it is for us to continue to keep this archaic policy in place, how many families with children or elderly or people who are sick are not able to benefit from the benefits that come from medical marijuana and CBD that have been proven time and again, and people who are being imprisoned and run through our criminal justice system just for using or possessing a substance that is far, far less dangerous than alcohol. This is one example of many where you found this unlikely partnership between a Democrat and a conservative Republican, because this is an issue that we both care about and we know it would be good for our country to enact. I work with Rand Paul on issues relating to both civil liberties as well as ending our interventionist foreign policy overseas. So if we look for it, there are so many opportunities to work with those who we might not think of as likely partners. And that's where I believe there's opportunity in this country to bring people together, to build those bridges, to find that common ground through this aloha, this respect for each other. And that's what I hope to be able to continue to do.
I'm sure you will. The viewer asked a question I want to ask you, and I think you already answered some of it, is, the constituents who want to get to move their congressional member sometimes think that they don't have any power because the lobbyists are going to, weigh in with money, and the big donors are going to weigh in. And that's reality. We all know that's true. But tell us a little bit from your perspective, what does it mean? How does a constituent actually impact you and your colleagues the most? Should they avoid, if their congressperson is a Republican, do they not talk about the OFF Act, or what do they do to really push them?
Yeah, no, I would encourage you, definitely talk about the OFF Act. Definitely talk about the issues that concern you, and come in and respectfully press them, make your argument, coming from a place of one of their voters, people who they're accountable to. They work, we work for our constituents. And, I'll tell you, we get phone calls, we get emails, we get letters every single day and every single week. And I keep track of what people are calling about, what issues they're calling about, and what position they're taking, so that I can keep a pulse on where my constituents are coming from. And I can tell you on some issues that we've seen in Congress that have really been lit up on social media, it has impacted the way that members of Congress have voted. Once they see that this public pressure is mounting. And again, that's where there's opportunity. I think voters underestimate their power. We have seen in, frankly, both Democrat and Republican races, how incumbents who had all the money, who were seemingly untouchable, were beat by far less funded candidates in a primary election or a general election. And it usually comes down to which candidate is more in touch with the people in their district, which one is listening and responding to the needs and desires of their constituents. And so our democracy works when we have an informed and involved electorate. So don't think that your vote and your voice don't matter, because they absolutely do.
We know it does with you, and that's a wonderful thing. And PDA has been so thrilled to work with you. You have been a joy.
It's mutual, likewise.
You are honest, and when you don't agree with us, you tell us that honestly. That's the kind of relationship with congressional members that helps us get things done. And we appreciate you so much. And the time that you took today matters so much to so many people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're glad you're in Colorado, and have a wonderful time here and a safe travels home.
I appreciate all you do, and I appreciate being able to see you and talk to all the viewers at Free Speech TV.
Mahalo.
Aloha to you. Thank you.